The house on Sycamore Lane had always smelled of fake cinnamon and lavender, the potpourri his mother insisted made everything seem welcoming. To Mitchell Clark, it masked the rot underneath. The polished floorboards, curated Facebook posts, and holiday photos with forced smiles, they were all part of the illusion. It was Mitchell's 30th birthday. He had spent the past 2 days preparing a 5-course meal, meticulously folding napkins and placing name cards for relatives who would likely forget his name. His parents, Joanne and Thomas Clark, sat in their usual spots at the head of the long oak table, drinks in hand, faces tight with the strain of maintaining superiority. As guests arrived, his brother Aaron made his grand entrance. Always late, always the star. Former college quarterback, local entrepreneur, though Mitchell knew his businesses barely scraped by. Aaron had a gravitational pull for approval that Mitchell had never known. Mitchell floated in the background of his own birthday, clearing plates and refilling drinks. Joanne praised Aaron's latest golf tournament win, while glossing over Mitchell's recent work promotion in cybersecurity. No one even asked what his job entailed. Then, just as dessert plates clinked onto the table, Joanne clinked her glass. "Everyone, we have a little something for our birthday boy." She said it like a punchline. Thomas handed Mitchell a small, velvet box. The room hushed. For a moment, Mitchell allowed himself to hope, just maybe. He opened the box. Inside was a miniature gold trophy. Plastic. Etched in thick black letters, "Most useless son." Laughter, awkward and stilted, broke out around the room. Aaron nearly choked on his wine, howling. Joanne gave him a wink. "We thought it was funny. You always take things too seriously, Mitch." The moment froze, sharp, surreal. Mitchell managed a dry chuckle, careful not to let his shaking hands betray him. "Good one," he muttered. His stomach twisted, not from embarrassment, but from something colder. Clarity. He walked to the office, closed the door behind him, and pulled out his phone. In seconds, he opened the Wells Fargo app. Their mortgage account popped up, his name the only one on the recurring payments. He initiated one last transfer. Confirmation. Done. He returned to the dining room, smiled politely. "Lasagna's on the stove," he said, then picked up his coat and keys. "Where are you going?" Joanne asked, the corners of her mouth tightening. "Home," he replied. "You'll figure it out." He didn't cry until he reached his car. But they were not tears of sadness. They were relief. He drove away, cut off their numbers, deleted family chats, and blocked them all on Facebook. For the first time in his life, Mitchell chose himself. The silence that filled Mitchell's apartment the morning after the birthday wasn't empty, it was thick with the weight of decision. The coffee brewed slower than usual, or maybe time itself had shifted. His phone, usually buzzing with leftover party chatter or guilt-riddled follow-ups, remained mute. Not a single text. Not a call. Not even from Aaron, who always followed up to say, "You took it too seriously, bro." Mitchell knew they didn't realize yet. That he had left for good. That their invisible emotional anchor was no longer tethered to them. His first instinct was panic. Years of people-pleasing didn't just unravel overnight. But instead of spiraling, he opened a Google Doc and typed the heading, the ledger they ignored. One by one, he listed every loan, payment, and silent act of financial rescue he'd provided since college. $6,800 to cover Aaron's DUI legal fees. $14,200 in mortgage support when Thomas lost his job. $3,000 to cover Joanne's dental surgery. Another $2,400 in emergency car repairs over 3 years. Dozens of smaller, help me out until payday transfers. He calculated the rough total, over $38,000. Untaxed, undocumented, unpaid, and completely unacknowledged. His hands trembled, not from rage, but from the dawning realization that none of it had ever come with thank yous. Not even receipts. He had functioned as a silent ATM with no PIN required. After documenting everything, Mitchell sat down with his laptop and began looking up local therapists. He hadn't cried again since the night in the car, but something inside him ached, not from sadness, but from emotional dehydration. He booked a session for the following Wednesday with a woman named Dr. Riley Hammond. Her bio said she specialized in family trauma and identity detachment. It felt oddly specific, almost like the internet had read him. Later that evening, he received his first text. "Aaron, hey man, funny stuff last night, lol. You good?" He didn't reply. Then came Joanne. "Mom, Mitch, I hope you're not being sensitive again. We just wanted to have a little fun." Still nothing. And finally, Thomas. "Dad, I know you stormed off last night, but don't overreact. We'll talk when you calm down. They had always painted his boundaries as mood swings, his silences as tantrums, his withdrawal as immaturity. But this time, Mitchell didn't feel like a child sulking. He felt like a man auditing the damage. That night, he called his friend Jonah. They hadn't spoken much since college, but Jonah had always been the kind of person who knew how to listen without interrupting. Mitchell told him everything: the trophy, the mortgage, the walkout. Jonah was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Dude, that wasn't a joke. That was cruelty dressed up in cheap plastic." It was the first time someone validated what Mitchell already knew. And for the first time, he didn't downplay it. The next day, Mitchell went for a walk. It was cold out, the kind of December chill that bit through your jeans. He let the wind slap his face as he walked past Christmas-lit windows and imagined other families. Ones who laughed together without daggers tucked behind their teeth. He knew they would try to reel him back in. With guilt, with manipulation, with financial emergencies. But this time, he had a different kind of currency: distance, clarity, and silence. The therapist's office was tucked between a dog grooming salon and a dry cleaner, but stepping inside felt like crossing a threshold into a different universe. Dr. Riley Hammond greeted Mitchell with a warm, knowing smile. Not fake, not overly chipper, just present. Her office smelled faintly of lemongrass and clean paper. The chairs were soft enough to sink into, but firm enough not to drown. "I don't even know where to begin," Mitchell said as he settled in, clutching a mug he wasn't drinking from. "Start anywhere," she replied. "We're not building a case, we're building context." And so he did. Over 90 minutes, he spilled pieces of himself he hadn't heard aloud before. About the time he fixed Aaron's car with his savings, but still had to walk to work. About how his parents once changed the locks on him during college break because he missed a family dinner. About his mother crying when he told her he was moving to a city she didn't like, not because she'd miss him, but because it looked bad. Dr. Hammond didn't interrupt. She didn't tilt her head like a dog trying to understand human language. She just nodded when it mattered and made notes only after asking, "Do you mind if I write this down?" When Mitchell left, he didn't feel fixed. He felt unfolded, like his life had been an overstuffed suitcase and someone had finally taken the time to lay everything out. That evening, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a group text. "Family dinner on Sunday. Let's put things behind us. Love, Mom." He stared at it. The audacity wasn't even surprising anymore. Then came the follow-up. "Aaron, seriously, dude. It was a gag gift. Lighten up. You don't want to miss Mom's roast." Mitchell typed one sentence, then deleted it. Then another. Finally, he just archived the thread. Not muted. Not blocked. Just gone. Out of his line of sight. Instead, he called Jonah again. They met for dinner at a small Vietnamese place in the neighborhood. Over bowls of pho, they caught up. Jonah had left a toxic job recently. They shared laughs, not the kind that sting later, but real, disarming ones. Mitchell mentioned wanting to maybe start writing again. He used to write short stories in college. Jonah encouraged it like it was something important, not something cute or nostalgic. Later that night, Mitchell made another list in his ledger they ignored document, this one titled, "Things I've Done Just to Be Loved." Apologized first, even when I wasn't wrong. Took the blame for Aaron's credit card mess in 2018. Skipped job interviews to attend last-minute family obligations. Let them criticize Vanessa, my ex, without defending her, because it was easier than arguing. Paid their cell phone plan for 4 years after they said I owed them. The list stretched for pages. It wasn't for legal use. It was for him. Therapy was teaching him to see the difference. That weekend, he declined every call, every message. He spent Sunday on a solo hike through Carson's Ridge, a trail just outside town. He didn't take selfies. He didn't post updates. He just walked. Alone. Free. And still, the phone buzzed. "Mom, I can't believe you'd missed dinner. Grandma asked about you. You broke her heart." Another message a minute later. "Aaron, hope you're happy. Dad looked like you'd killed someone." And finally, "Dad, you're being selfish. Get over yourself." Mitchell didn't cry this time. He didn't pace or rehearse responses. He just turned the phone off and kept walking. Somewhere between the pines and the stillness, he felt something loosen in his chest. They were still playing the old game, but he wasn't on the field anymore. The following Friday, Mitchell's mailbox held a handwritten card. The envelope was thick, creamy, and embossed in gold cursive, "Clark Family Values." Of course, he didn't open it right away. He left it on the counter while making tea, feeding his cat Bowie, and finishing a chapter in a novel he'd started the week before. For once, it wasn't procrastination. It was control. When he finally slit the envelope, the contents were exactly what he expected, and somehow still worse. A card that said, "Family means forgiveness," with a personal message beneath. "Mitchell, we don't know what we did that was so horrible. If you can't take a joke, maybe that says more about you than us. Aaron misses his brother. We all do. Let's be adults. Mom and Dad. P.S. We still have your seat at the table. Come home." He placed the card next to his toaster, like a failed recipe or a receipt for something he regretted buying. He didn't need to reply. The message wasn't really for him. It was a performance, for their conscience. Dr. Hammond had called this emotional gaslighting masquerading as goodwill. Mitchell called it a trap in a greeting card. Later that night, Aaron messaged again, this time through a new number. "You need to stop playing victim. If anyone's hurt, it's Mom. You know she cried last week, right? Because of you. You're punishing everyone." Mitchell reread it. Not out of shock, but study. These messages were now case studies. Proof. Echoes of an old narrative that used to shape him. Instead of replying, Mitchell added a new section to his growing journal, the Family Playbook, Guilt Edition. Frame the victim as overreacting. Center the pain of the aggressor. Use family as a silencing spell. Invoke coming home as a final solution. Never say sorry. Say let's move on. He closed the journal and opened his laptop. On a whim, he applied for a creative writing program he'd bookmarked 6 months earlier. It wasn't prestigious. It wasn't far. But it was his. Something that would require no translation of worth to anyone else. Jonah texted minutes later. "You still good for tomorrow's group hang?" Mitchell replied, "Yeah, I'll bring pie." It was a small sentence, but it felt massive. A year ago, he might have canceled, citing a family thing or not feeling up to it. Now he was showing up. Fully. Quietly. Authentically. At the Saturday hangout, sitting on a rooftop strung with fairy lights, someone asked what he did for a living. Mitchell hesitated, then said, "I'm between things, but I'm figuring it out." No self-deprecating joke. No minimizing. Just honesty. The group nodded, and someone passed him a beer. Around midnight, his phone buzzed again. "Aaron, you're throwing your life away. You'll come crawling back when you realize no one else will ever love you like we do." Mitchell stared at it. This time, he didn't feel anger or guilt. He felt nothing. A clean, expansive nothing. And then, a warm fullness. Because he didn't need to prove he was lovable. Not anymore. He didn't reply. He deleted the number. Then he turned back to the group and said, "So anyway, anyone want pie?" Everyone did. Mitchell didn't expect quiet to feel so loud. No one was yelling at him. No passive-aggressive texts. No surprise drop-ins. The house didn't echo with reprimands disguised as advice. And yet, some nights, he still caught himself listening for it. The silence felt earned, but unfamiliar. Like moving into a home where your name was finally on the deed, but the walls still smelled like someone else's regrets. It had been 3 weeks since he'd blocked Aaron's second burner number. A full month since he'd seen his parents. The absence of drama was not peace yet, it was detox. Dr. Hammond had warned him about this. "You'll mourn people who are still alive," she said during their last session. "Not because you miss who they were, but because you're finally letting go of who you needed them to be." And Mitchell did mourn. Not for the people they were, but for the idea that they might someday understand. That hope had been his drug, his leash, and now it was gone. So he grieved it like a death. Quietly. With no funeral and no flowers. He wrote more. A piece titled Inheritance that explored emotional legacies passed down like bad family recipes. Another called Echo Chamber about how abuse whispers until it becomes your inner voice. His writing group, mostly strangers turned anchors, read them aloud, and for the first time, Mitchell's pain lived outside of him, met without pity but with respect. At work, things got simpler too. The manager at the bookstore had noticed his shift in energy. "You're different," she said one afternoon. Like someone who finally stopped apologizing for breathing. Mitchell smiled. That's pretty much what happened. Outside of work, he started building things. Not metaphorical, actual things. A bookshelf. A small desk. He watched YouTube tutorials and made messes on purpose. It felt good to create without judgment. Without his father peering over his shoulder asking, "Is that really the best use of your time?" He even took a short trip to Vermont with Jonah and Leah, hiking a quiet trail without cell service. No messages. No past. Just cold wind and pine needles and his own 2 feet on the ground. At the summit, Jonah offered to take his picture, but Mitchell shook his head. No need, he said. I was here. That's enough. It wasn't defiance. It was freedom. On the drive back, they passed a family having a picnic near a lake. Kids laughing. Parents holding hands. The image flickered like static in his chest. Jonah must have noticed. You okay? Mitchell nodded slowly. Yeah, just learning not to confuse healthy with unfamiliar. That night, he journaled again. Not about his family, but about himself. He wrote about how he likes thunderstorms, how he enjoys soup in summer, how he prefers lowercase texting. Nothing revolutionary, just pieces of him. Not a reaction to them, not a defense, just Mitchell. The next morning, a letter arrived from his parents. No return address. A single line inside. One day, you'll regret this silence. Mitchell burned it in the sink. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Because he wasn't silent. He had said no. And for once, that was loud enough. It had been 2 months since Mitchell spoke to anyone in his family. He marked the date not on a calendar, but in how quiet his inner world had become. The white noise of needing to be enough had finally gone silent. He used to think healing would look like vengeance. Bold declarations, dramatic exits, maybe even a courtroom moment where he got to say everything perfectly. But it wasn't like that. It was smaller. Stranger. Healing, he discovered, looked like not reacting. It looked like not checking his phone 5 times after setting a boundary. It looked like going grocery shopping without imagining his parents criticizing his meal choices. It looked like reading a book and not thinking once about what Aaron would have said about it. It looked like remembering he liked who he was, and not needing anyone else to confirm it. That morning, he sat with a cup of coffee, scrolling through job listings, not because he was desperate to leave the bookstore, but because for once, he could imagine more. It felt like his life had opened up a little. Like a window stuck shut for years had finally creaked open. He wasn't running. He was choosing. That was the difference. His therapist, Dr. Hammond, leaned back in her chair during their session later that week and smiled. You're not flinching when you say your own name anymore, she said. Mitchell laughed. I didn't even realize I was. She nodded. That's the point. They talked about closure, about the myth of some final moment where the pain stops entirely. But Mitchell wasn't looking for an end anymore. He was learning to carry the weight without letting it drag him under. Later, at his writing group, he read a new piece, one not about his family, but about the sound of wind through maple trees. He spoke quietly, without performance, and when he finished, no one clapped. They just sat with it. It was enough. After the meeting, Jonah pulled him aside. You know, you're not just surviving anymore. You're rooted. It's different. Mitchell paused, then smiled. Yeah, I feel it too. The next weekend, he held a dinner at his place. Not a party, just a handful of people who made his life better without asking him to bleed for it. Leah brought roasted vegetables. Jonah made bread. No one asked about his parents. No one needed to. At the end of the night, as they said goodbye and laughter lingered like warmth in the corners of his small kitchen, Mitchell stood alone for a moment, just breathing. There was a time when silence had been filled with tension, fear, or waiting. Now it simply was. That night, he wrote one last letter in his journal. They called me useless. Maybe they even believed it. But I don't. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. And that's more powerful than any apology I'll never get. I don't need them to admit they were wrong. I just need to keep being right about myself. He closed the notebook and didn't feel the need to open it again for a while.